Lori is a therapist who is training family counseling, child and adolescent therapy, and infant mental health. She founded the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, and she is from Denver. And she's gonna share, she's also expert by experience, and she's gonna share her journey with, everything she's been through to found and do this amazing work EndCAN is doing. So you're welcome to share, Ed, and introduce yourself as well. And I really recommend you to enjoy this lecture and learn from it. We're gonna leave, I think, around 10 to 15 minutes in the end to questions, and also to our survey. Please make sure, if you are here to also get CUs, make sure to fill the survey, because that's the way you're gonna get it. So that's it, and I hand it on to Lauren. Thank you for being here today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm a little bummed that we're not in person. My stepson-in-law and his wife live right outside of Tulsa, so I was really looking forward to having dinner with them, but I get to see them in a couple of weeks. And I just went to Tulsa they just moved there last summer, and we just went at the end of the year, and I really loved the town, and I also loved the nothingness outside of Tulsa. In Colorado, you don't find nothingness very often. There's just houses and building everywhere. so we've lost a lot of that quiet. So thank you very much, Daphne, for having me here, and thank you to Haruv. I have just had the honor of working with you all for the last 5 years, and any and all opportunity I've had to be able to connect or say hi or just share experience and hope with your audiences, I'm honored to do. So I'm going to give a little bit of a disclaimer, because last year when I spoke to a Haruv group, there was just some strong reaction. I think that for some of the people on the call, it was hard to hear. And I know my story. Sometimes I am just a lot, like, as a human being, and I know that, I've been told that, and I want to honor that for you all. And feel free, if it becomes a lot, or if you need anything, let's use the chat as an opportunity to tap into that, as well as I will not be offended if you're like, I gotta go. I can't do this anymore. But I would be more inclined to invite you to reach out to somebody privately in the chat, and ideally get some support, because that's how we create change, right? Is by talking and supporting one another. So there's that. And then the next piece is, I know for all of you, we've all lived in the world of technology and Zoom for many years, and I am very much of a people person. So I love to see faces. I love to engage. And so if anybody who is off screen wants to come on screen, whether you're in bed or on your couch, or probably not in the bathroom, but or shower, but anywhere else, please just join us on screen. It is just so nice to be able to see you and to connect in that way. So I invite that. Hi Jennifer, if at all you're ever comfortable. And here's Sharon. Thanks guys. See, it's working. So I'm going to share my screen, and what I dislike about sharing screen is that it makes all of us go away. So I'm hoping that by sharing my screen, you'll all still be on the side, and I'm going to expand you and still keep you as the bulk and my screen as part. And I'm just going to come on and off of sharing screen because I'm weird like that. So here we go. Okay. And I want to expand you. There we go. Now you're big. That's so great. Okay. Maybe not. Now it's super small on your screen, isn't it? Is it? I don't know. Okay. Here. I can't hear any of you, but okay.
I think it's a little bit smaller. Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah.
Did that work? Okay. Okay. So you know what brought you here. This is for Haruv, USA. My name is Lori. I'm a master's level licensed therapist. I'm also specialized in rapid resolution therapy, infant mental health, child and adolescent therapy, and marriage and family therapy. I am a sponge and I just love to learn, and anything I can do to help me help the world better, I try to do. I did a lot better back when I was learning and in school than I am doing now, because I have just so many things always on my plate, but I love, love, love to learn. But what I would love to do right now is just take a moment in the chat and have you all tell me what a survivor of child abuse looks like to you. Scared. Thank you, Christy. Lonely, timid, triggered, withdrawn, resilient. Anyone? Ah, Renee, 5 stars. Wise. Could be anyone. Catherine, hopeful. Oh, it's going so fast I can't keep up. Maybe turning to drugs, sex, and violence. Yes. Confused. Yes. Yes. All of those things. What I find so interesting, and I'd love for anybody who wants to come off of chat or off of what is that, mute, you're welcome to do that. But what I find so interesting is, as we ask that question, we didn't describe hair color, we didn't describe socioeconomic class, we didn't describe race, we didn't describe what neighborhood they live in. We mostly described behaviors and emotions, right? So one thing that I think is so interesting is that as a society and as culture, we forget that child abuse does not discriminate. Neglect does not discriminate. I have seen it everywhere. I'm sure you have all seen it everywhere. And the field has seen child abuse and neglect just impact everybody from all different classes, all different races, all different age brackets. And truly the impact of that is so long, and what am I trying to say? And it happens, wow, I'm really stumbling over it's like one drop of poison ruins a whole barrel of water. That's what I was trying to say. And I just find that really interesting how we forget that, because we're not talking about child abuse and neglect in the way that we need to. So in 2018, the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, we did a study with ZAGB, and we asked them to talk with the general public. And what we wanted to know is, did the general public see child abuse and neglect as a major health concern? And fortunately and unfortunately, the general public did. They saw it even more of a concern than heart disease and strokes, Alzheimer's, substance abuse, tobacco use, and then other health associated infections. But it came right after nutrition, obesity, cancer, and drug addiction. And so we're going to be redoing this study in the next 8 months, and it will help us determine, is it changed? Has our work and our effort and conversation having impacted anything? Do people have a greater understanding of the link between all of these things to child abuse? So I just found that I just want to share this with you guys, because I do find it really interesting that 42% of the population find it to be a top public health concern. And to me, I always struggle with this slide. I'm trying to put you guys somewhere safe so that you can still see what I'm showing you. I've always struggled with this slide. And the reason I struggle with this slide is because these numbers are hard. These numbers are hard to see. I don't think that people have a true understanding of what these numbers imply. And also, these numbers are so inaccurate. And so in 2020, approximately 1,750 children died from abuse and neglect related death. 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse and neglect in the past year in the United States. This was in 2020, and these are all based on the CDC Administration for Children and Family Bureau. And then the last one is that the estimated economic burden based on the annual invested cases of child abuse and neglect over the course of a lifetime is $592 billion. So for this year, $592 billion is what it will cost to support the children that were abused in this year, which is approximately around 760,000 children only in the child welfare system. And so I'm going to stop screen share for a moment because I want to talk about that. How many people have known somebody, just by show of hands, you can raise them or flash them up with the little reactions button, but how many people have known somebody that's been abused and neglected? Okay, so everybody I can see has their hand up. And then even the people that I can't see raise their hand, right? So that's a lot of us, right? We all know somebody. Now, of those, how many of those people were involved in the child welfare system? Excuse me, let me re-ask that question. Raise your hand if you know people who were abused and neglected that weren't involved in the child welfare system. Okay. So that's a lot of hands too, right? And so these numbers, the numbers that I just showed you, were only numbers that are reported by child welfare. There is no other reporting mechanism that captures the information of child abuse and neglect occurring. We also know that the average age for a woman to share her abuse and neglect story is 52 years. That's 52 years old. And we don't know what that number is, the average age for a man to share his story, because we've only just begun hearing from men in the last, say, 5 to 7 years, their stories and experiences around their childhood or child abuse and neglect. And so the issue with these numbers is that they're not really reflecting true child abuse and neglect. Right? They're not capturing it because we're missing an entire population of people that weren't involved in the child welfare system. So the only way your number gets counted is if you have an open child abuse and neglect case. If you don't have an open child abuse and neglect case, your number falls into the reported case or the reported numbers, and we, on average, for the last 10 years, there's about 3.4 million child abuse reports made. And only, again, on average, only about 674,000 cases get opened. And when we think about that, on average, it's pretty steady, right? Pretty steady, 674,000. What that tells me, as also a businesswoman, is that that's about the capacity that our child welfare system can handle, right? 672,000, 674,000. Like that seems like more of a capacity issue than it is about really being able to provide services and treatment and breaking the cycle of child abuse and neglect. So now I'm going to go back to screen sharing. I'm like bipolar here. Sorry, guys. I just want to give you all of the information that I possibly can. So what happens to a person who's abused? Let's use the chat again. Oh, great question, Christy. I'm just going to answer that really quickly. That's national. So Christy also says they become homeless, they get ignored, dissociated from society, life is disrupted. You guys are going to start going so fast I won't be able to catch up. Lost sense of safety in the world, separated from their family, shamed and blamed, delusioned. They have a lack of trust with others. They lose their jobs, drop out of school. Yes. Many die and have permanent disabilities. Oh my goodness. Low self-confidence, maladaptive coping skills. They repeat the pattern in their own life. Yes. Okay, so you guys get it. Like you get it. You get the point. Because what we do know And studies have shown this since the ACEs study that occurred in 1997 between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. What we have learned is that chronic disease, psychiatric disorders, risky sex behaviors, criminal behaviors, poverty, intergenerational repetitiveness, obesity, alcoholism, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all of those things are significantly more likely to occur if somebody has a traumatic experience, multiple traumatic experiences before the age of 15. The brain is ever developing. And what happens, I'm going to stop sharing again because I just want to see your faces. What happens is that when you're little, when you're 11 and you're in a household where you're witnessing domestic violence, you're being touched inappropriately, you don't have enough food to feed you and your 5 siblings, or you have all the resources in the world and your dad's climbing in bed with you every night, right? Your body is borrowing the energy necessary to increase your immune system, to strengthen white blood cells, to maximize your heart's development, to maximize all of your other organs' developments. Your body is borrowing energy from doing those things, those everyday necessity-based things that we do during sleep, that we do throughout our day, that we do through exercise and healthy, laughing, engagement, activities. The body's borrowing energy to stay alive. Because when you're being sexually abused, or when you're not being nurtured emotionally and you don't feel safe, or you're being screamed at, or you're being made to feel small or ridiculed or beaten, or cigarettes are being put out on your skin, when those things are happening, you're not thinking about, oh, well, I should build my heart muscle. My heart muscle should get stronger. Your body's not like, oh, let's go do that. The body's instead like, holy cow, I've got to stay alive. Because 95% of our brain is primitive. 95% of our brain is first animalistic. And there's 5% of our brain that makes us human, that makes us separate from all animals. And that 5% of the brain is where everything filters through. And if something's being read, like if you're watching a scary movie, if it's being read as scary, your body's going to react like, oh, that's scary. That's why I don't watch scary movies, because I don't like to feel like I'm going to die. I mean, that's so frightening, right? My body reacts to that. And it does that because my brain does not know the difference between reality and false. And so our little kids, our 11, 12-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 1-year-olds, their brains are doing the exact same thing. And the primary goal in an animal is just stay alive. Okay? All right. I'm going to go back to screen share. Okay. So we know that when we reduce sources of stress, all of a sudden, core life skills strengthen. Things get better. When we have supportive families or supportive relationships, it doesn't even have to be a family member. All of a sudden, our stress reduces, our core skills increase, things get better, and it all feeds into one. And that helps us to understand that children who have healthy developmental and educational achievement become adults who are responsive, caregiving. They have economic stability. It doesn't matter how much you make. Dave Ramsey is the key at saying this. I don't care how much you make. It's what you do with the money that you make, right? It's about being responsible adults. But when we learn fear as a child, we're more inclined to repeat fear in adulthood. So I'm going to tell you guys a bit about my story. But first, I want to brag about this picture because I love this picture so much. I've been using it for the better part of forever, at least the last 10 years. I don't know where I found it. Oh, come on now. Go back to that picture. Hold on. Let me go from current slide. See, I'm just so not techie. Okay. I've been using this picture because the little girl on the left is like deathly afraid, and everybody else is smiling and screaming, and they're all having they're all really happy, but she is like, this isn't fun for me. This isn't fun for me. So, I just can relate to that so very much. But I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me and my story and kind of what brought me here. And this is the part of the presentation that can be hard and can really be a lot for people to hear. So again, you have full permission to come out. It'll probably take me, because I talk too much, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And so you can definitely come back. And if at any point you want to just turn me off, please do so. But if you need help and you need to reach out. And Daphne, would you be the best person for them to raise their hands or send you a private message to? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so for me, here's what happened. I was darling, all right? I was born adorable. Let's just start there. Like baseline, blue eyes, fat cheeks. I had dimples in my legs from the get-go. Like I was just cute. I was a chubby little cute girl. And I grew up in a very blue collar, significantly low income community. And we had a tiny little 3-bedroom house, 1 story, and we rented our home from the man that my dad worked for. And my dad's company was across the street, so it was very industrial. My dad worked at a tubing welding company, so it was like always loud whistles and machinery and forklifts and stuff like that. And so in 1983, I was a 3-year-old little girl with long blonde hair that was always pristine because I love my hair, and still had these chubby cheeks and big blue eyes. And on August 22nd, I was playing in my front yard. And it was my dad's birthday. So he took the day off of work to stay home with my brother and I. And our babysitter was 2 doors down. So everybody on our street, we lived on a horseshoe, and everybody on our street worked at the factory. And all of the houses, not all, but most of the houses were owned by Gary Oakley, the man that owned my dad's company. So people were in and out all day long. A lot of people walked across the street to their homes for lunch. And all of us were just always outside. So on this day, my dad took the day off. I didn't have to go to Sally's house for babysitting because my dad was home and he was painting our house. And at lunchtime, my mom came home to have a birthday lunch with my dad. And as soon as she left, my brother and I went back outside, and I was able to manipulate my father with my big blue eyes into giving me another popsicle. And he went inside to get us my brother and I a popsicle. And while he was inside, this orange Datsun hatchback drove up, and the passenger door was open, and the man inside asked if I liked candy. And again, I had these dimples on my legs, and I loved candy. I was just an excited little girl, and so we quickly negotiated, and he lured me into the car, and he asked me to leave my pants there on the sidewalk, and so I did, and within seconds we were gone. He drove me then up to the mountains and about 25 miles from my home, and he proceeded to abuse me and do what pedophiles do with children. And when he was done, he placed me in the pit of an outhouse toilet 15 feet below ground and left me for dead. His hope and goal was that I would not be found. And he went about his business and went back to work and did what he did. And I'll back up just a little bit to my father. So my dad comes outside with these 2 popsicles, and my brother is standing there on the porch. He had just seen this happen. My brother's 5 at the time, 18 months older than me. And he gave out this kind of crying sound, and there was no words. And my dad looked at the curb and looked at my brother, and looked at the curb and looked at my brother. And my dad's best friend was there and threw his keys at him and grabbed my brother and said, "Go get her." So my dad got in the car and drove to the end of our horseshoe and he didn't know which way to go, right or left, because he didn't know where we had gone. And so then he turned around and made the hard call, first to my mom and let her know that I had been taken, and then second to 911, where a man named Terry Soul, who was 18 years old, he was a 911 operator, first day on the job, answered the call, and they said that I had been taken. Terry Soul is a huge motivational speaker and radio host on the West Coast, and I've been on his radio station about 6 times now in the last 15 years, and I changed his life, and in that moment he changed mine. So the police department in our little, blue-collar town was it consisted of 4 people, and it was like the Andy Griffith Police Department, and they did the very best they could, and they were wonderful, very passionate people who just jumped into action. They had never had anything like this happen, and it was 12:22 in the afternoon, so in the middle of broad daylight. There were at least 15 people that witnessed me getting in this car, and so there were a lot of eyewitnesses on the car color, on all of those things. They had partial license plate, and my kidnapper had attempted to kidnap another little girl 2 weeks before me up the street, but her father had come out and run him off and then followed him. Went to the police station, made a report, and so then the police department documented that. So they were able to then go to the man's house that had taken me later that day, or even the next day. I'm not exactly sure the timing of that. And, his wife said he had been home with her, and she gave him an alibi, and so they kept going. So fast forward 4 days. Bird watchers who were out obviously watching birds were driving up in the mountains, and they were looking for a specific type of bird, and the wife had to go to the bathroom, and they saw the outhouse that I was in, and the husband kept driving, and the wife, they got about a mile down the road, and the wife said, you need to turn around, I have to go. And so, like any good husband, he listened and turned around. And while he was using the restroom, they heard a cry, and they looked around and followed it. And eventually they looked down, and they saw my big chubby cheeks and big blue eyes. And they said, "What are you doing here?" And I told them, "I live here." And so to me, that moment right there, that moment in time, is the power of a child's resiliency, because our children will embrace and accept anything as their new normal just to survive. And I did exactly that. I was there for 4 days. My executive functioning skills were non-existent. And so my ability to understand time and the concept of time was null and void. It wasn't even possible. And so what I did instead was embrace this environment, this feces and urine filled, cold, damp room, pit, toilet was my new home. And they needed to find somebody that was small enough to come down and get me. So it took a while. The bird watchers went straight to a telephone and called 911, and the call came through to the fire department and the police department up in the mountains, and all it said was "kid in the commode." And so the two firefighters that came first on scene were Alan and Joanne, who I have just in the last year and a half met and fallen in love with both of them, and I changed their lives, and on that day they changed mine. And Joanne is a 91-year-old badass woman who has written 23 books and has, ironically, before and after, written a lot of books about child abuse because she has her own story. And so when they got on scene, and Alan was a 17-year-old volunteer firefighter. And on May 11th, I'm going to his retirement party from the fire department. He's a chief fireman. And it's just so cool to have these kind of relationships and these ongoing connections with these people that we, you know, our lives and our trajectory just changed because of one another. So nonetheless, Alan and Joanne got on scene, and they had thought that the child in the toilet was the child of the bird watchers. And the bird watchers said, I've never seen this kid a day in my life. I don't even know who this is. So when Kevin Baker, who was a petite man, came down on a harness to get me out, he said, hold on. And one of 3 memories that I have of my abduction was that moment when he said, hold on. And I kid you not, I grabbed onto that man's neck and I did not want to let go. And he handed me to Joanne, and Joanne and Alan both sat in the ambulance with me while we drove down the mountain. So it was about a 35-40 minute drive. And Joanne, being a survivor herself, she looked at me and she said to me, Lori, what happened to you is not okay. What you went through was not your fault, and it was very wrong. And you didn't deserve that, and you deserve better. You just need to remember that, okay? And she said those words to me, and I don't remember those words, but she remembers those words vividly. Last week, I got to spend 4 hours with her at her house, and she told me those words again, and it was just so, I just think it's so beautiful that she said what she needed to hear. And so, fast forward, my abductor had been arrested while I was on my 3rd day of missing. He still did not give any information. His car had been impounded. His house had been searched without a warrant. And so you can imagine what that did to the criminal case. I was reunited with my family. And on 5 days later, I was released from the hospital and went straight from the hospital to the police station, where I went into a small room with a 2-way mirror, and 7 men walked in and stood in front of me, and each was asked to step forward and ask if I like candy and tell me to get into the car. And at 3 years old, I was able to identify man number 4 as my abductor. And all of that was recorded on film. And then that film was taken to a treatment facility here in Denver called the Kemp Center. And the director of the Kemp Center, his name was Dr. Krugman. And they asked the Kemp Center, hey, is this admissible in court? Or reliable in court. And the Kemp Center said, well, yeah, it's reliable, but it's not admissible. So then they compiled this plan. And on Labor Day weekend, I went and did my first, what is now known as forensic interview, with Dr. David Jones, who had an earpiece in his ear and a phone in the room. And Dr. Krugman, Dick Krugman, and the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the Kemp Center's attorney were all behind a 2-way mirror, and they cross-examined me and did my testimony that way. And so I had 5 forensic interview videos with David Jones. And at one point on the 5th interview, he had asked me, probably 40 times to identify my abductor during all of those interviews. Like, they showed me men's hair, they showed me mustaches, they showed me pictures of him, they showed me pictures of other men that looked like him, they showed me a video of him, all of these different things, because they just wanted to see if I was reliable. And every single time, consistently, I said, yes, that's the man that did it. And on my 5th interview, I was so mad. And when I get mad, I get mad. I'm emotional. I'm a strong woman. You know, like and I'd spent 4 days in a toilet. So I think I kind of deserved to have permission to get mad, right? So on this 5th day, David Jones is asking me, Lori, and he's British, right? So I love British accents, by the way. And he says, Lori, I just have one more question for you. I'm going to need you to identify you're the bad man just one more time. Lori, could you look at these pictures for me just once more? And I said, I'm done. I'm done. And I got mad at him. And there was a round table in the room that was child size. And there was a fake rotary phone on, oh, thanks, Sharon. There was a fake rotary phone on the table. And so I'm in a frilly dress. My hair is perfect because it's my hair. And I sit down on the table and I cross my legs and I turn my back to David Jones. You know, as a clinician, anybody who's worked with children, we know that this is very clear body language, right? So I turn my back to him and I pick up the phone and I call Dr. Krugman. And in that moment, I said, hello, Dr. Krugman, it's Lori. What are you doing? And I just start talking to him about my brother, and my grandpa is doing floors for us and all these different things. And what I found so interesting, I just saw those videos for the first time about 5 years ago. And what I found so interesting about those videos, first as a clinician and as an infant mental health therapist, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so rich. Like, I was just so like infatuated. And then seeing myself as this badass, strong little girl who is sassy as all get out. Like, I was strong then, I'm strong now. And seeing that and seeing how clearly I communicated was amazing. But the last thing, the thing that I found so valuable, was that my mom and dad were outside that room and I didn't walk out. That when I picked up that phone, I didn't call my mom, my dad, my cousins, my friend. I didn't call anybody except Dr. Krugman, who was a clinician, who was a pediatrician, who was trained to be there and available and attentive to the child. And that's exactly what he had done to me. And he was not in the room. He would greet me at the front door and walk me up to the room every time I was there. But I've only seen him at this point 10 times. He spent the rest of the time behind a camera, because that's what pediatricians are trained to do, right? Become videographers of forensic interviews. But he spent the rest of his time behind the camera, and he was my safe person. So I'm going to really quickly recap this next part. My abductor was, when they saw the film and his attorney went back to him, they said, you need to plea bargain. You're going to lose. And so he pled guilty to rape, kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted murder. And he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and he was released after 6 years for good behavior. And that makes a lot of people mad. It is like, our system is what it is. Unfortunately, I was his 13th conviction, and that's just the way the cookie crumbled. And I am not interested in being so mad that our system failed. I'm more interested in taking that story and doing something good with it. So I was about 8 years old when I first started writing in a diary. And when I wrote my book last year, well, it took me 4 years to write it, but last year it came out. When I wrote my book, I found those diaries. And I wrote in my diaries at 8 years old that I wanted to be like David Jones and Dr. Krugman. I wanted to give back to the world. I wanted to change the way people treated me. I didn't want to be seen as a statistic. I didn't want to have what we described in the chat of what's going to happen to me as I grow up to be a survivor of child abuse and neglect. I didn't want to be what people assumed me to be. I didn't want to have those labels. I didn't want to have this story, but I knew that I had a choice in my story, and I was damn sure I wasn't going to let it go to waste. So I spent the bulk of my life, the rest of my life, stumbling and crying and hurting and getting mad and being triggered and all of those things. I have spent the rest of my life dedicated to that. And my senior year of high school, I reconnected with Dr. Krugman, and he has become my surrogate father. He has become the person that I call when I'm sad, when I'm scared, when I'm lonely. I talk to him at least 7 times a week, which I'm sure that he would prefer was just maybe 1, but that's what happens when you get me. Last night it was his first night alone in weeks, and I called him. And we argued about statistics and numbers that I wanted to share with all of you. And it was just fun because he's so incredible and he's a funny, loving, wonderful human. And I'm just so honored to know him. And that has led me to do this work. I knew very early on that I wanted to do it, and here I am doing it. So my freshman year of high school or college, nobody in my family had ever been to college. And my freshman year of college, my second day of school, my Irish history teacher said, surround yourself with people you want to be like. And I looked around and I was like, well, shit. I need to start over. So I called Dr. Kirkman and I said, you're the only person I know that has a degree. Will you be my mentor? And so then he was my mentor for the next 11 years. And during that time, we had the same conversations over and over and over again. And he had become the dean of CU Med School. And as the dean, he had been in charge of cardiology, of cancer, of juvenile diabetes, of breast cancer, all of these different things. He had all these departments focused on that. And he had watched in his 25 years how each one of those topics, each one of those issues, the LGBT movement, right, the suicide, all of those things had gotten better because there was a national foundation focused on raising awareness, expanding prevention programs, understanding research and investing in that research, doing education and training once we know that research to recycle it and put it back out into the general public so that people can know what to do to take care of themselves. 35 years ago, if you were a woman and you were over the age of 40, you did not get a mammogram unless you paid out of pocket. Now, if you're a woman over 40, you get a mammogram. If you're even close to being at risk, you get a mammogram on a regular basis. We know how to self-examine. We know how to embrace somebody that says that they identify as LGBTQ, right? We know these things because people have come together and they've raised their voices and they've made change. And there was not a national organization focused on child abuse and neglect by emphasizing and expanding prevention, education and training, research, and advocacy by changing policy and lives. And so when Dr. Krugman decided he wanted to retire from being the dean after 25 years, he wanted to go back to work. And he asked if I would help him open the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. So fast forward 5 years, he barely does anything and I'm doing all the work. And but I love him and he actually does do a lot. And I'm so grateful to him. And I'm so grateful for my position here at EndCAN. I have like the dream team. A couple of them are on here. Kendall's on here. Who else is on here? Amy's on here. So both of them are now my new favorite employees. They'll both get something from me just for being here. And it's there. Oh, Remy's here. Hi, Remy. And Remy's here. Yay. But this is my team. And we spend every day fighting, laughing, crying, trying to change the world, trying to do great things, loving one another, and having a great time on a really hard topic. And that's what we do. So I am going to go back to screen share because I've totally forgotten what else I'm supposed to say, but I want to say it. All right. Okay. So one of the things that many people know me to say is that we all have a story. What are you going to do with yours? And I've never met somebody that doesn't have a story. And their story doesn't have to be about child abuse and neglect. Their story could be about, rescuing animals. Their story can be about getting an education. Their story can be about becoming a blonde after being a brunette forever. But what are you going to do with your story? How are you going to share that and be impactful? And I have a story, and here's what I do with it. I do not want anybody to feel the pains and the hurts and the rejections and the abandonments that I have felt at all. So I have an expectation that the people around me put up and show up and use their stories for good. I also believe that it is possible to heal. And I believe that it is okay to cause harm and do harm as long as you learn from it and stop doing it. I believe in rehabilitation. I also know that I can help people see that they can do something to be a part of the change. And I also do this because I know that I can. And I truly believe that. So, I don't know if you can see this on the side. Oh, shoot. Oh, how do I go back? Let's see. Nope. See, I shouldn't be in charge. Here we go. From current slide. So our goal, here we go, is to have zero abuse in our lifetime. And everybody, especially my father, is like, that's never going to happen. That's such a lofty goal. And it might be a lofty goal, but I am going to do everything in my power between now and the day that I clock out to try to end child abuse and neglect. And I will not stop. And I know that when I was 9, I went to my parents and I said, why do people who are gay live in closets? And my parents were like, what? And I said, but they come out of the closet. I don't understand. Why do they live there? And my parents were like, Lori, that's just an expression that when somebody identifies as gay or lesbian, that they come out. And I was like, oh, I mean, it just didn't even make sense to me. But now my kids don't even know what in the closet is. It's not even in their language. And there is a whole new language for people to identify one another. And that is a change. And it's a change for something that there is still a very mass group of society that's against. And I've never met anybody who's against ending child abuse. And if you are, we should probably have a conversation because that's weird, right? So it's a win-win. My chances are pretty high of doing for this topic what's been done for breast cancer, what's been done for suicide, and what's been done for the LGBT movement. So that's why we're here. All right. So the case for change. We know that when parents feel supported, they're less likely to abuse their kids. We know that when people feel like they matter, they're more inclined to experience joy. And how do you cause harm out of joy? When you're happy and laughing and giggly and all of that, it's really hard to cause harm. We also know that when people feel joy and loved, I just said this. They're drastically less likely to cause harm. I beat myself to the punch on that one. And then lastly, we know that when children have safe, supportive, and nurturing environments, their chances of thriving go up. So how do we improve our culture to do more supportive, or to be more supportive and engaged? And here at EndCAN, we believe that that's understanding research, that's educating people, it's bringing people together, and it's truly embedding prevention programs throughout society on the entire lifespan. So every child needs connection. Every child needs carers. Every child needs to have their voices heard, and every child needs you. One thing that I find so valuable is our ability to be impactful and our ability to change a child's life. So how many of you have ever seen a kid in a grocery store? Just Melanie. Oh, Sue did. Sue and Melanie are the only people. Christy, she says somebody in a grocery store who is a child. Okay, that's a couple. Jennifer just did too. So we've seen kids in grocery store. How many of you have seen kids throwing temper tantrums in the grocery store? Oh, now your hands go up. All of a sudden, they weren't kids before, but when we say kids who are angry in the grocery store, you're all like, yep, been there, done that, seen it. So yeah, I mean, we've all seen that. But have you ever, when that kid's throwing a temper tantrum, instead of judging mom, because I've been that mom that's been judged because my kid is throwing a temper tantrum, But instead, we walk up or walk by and we make a funny face, or we smile at them, or we let them know we see them, or we just like Care Bear stare on them. That's my favorite thing to do, is Care Bear stare love, right? Just shine love on them. Because for me, my person was not my dad, was not my mom, was not all of those other people in my world. My person was this man who I barely had even seen. And he became my North Star. And here I am, 37, 38 years later, I don't even know, almost 40 years, 40, gah, jeez, almost 40 years later, and he still is changing my life. He became my North Star. So we know that when we get to be the light for kids, we can make true change. So, can you, I'm so bad at this. Oh my gosh, all you have to do is push the arrow over button and it takes you back. People, this is huge. Okay, so I'm just saying, let's do this, join me in being the change that we wish to see in the world. One thing I love about dandelions is that they spread. One thing I hate about dandelions is that they spread, right? So let's spread it. It's hard, it's scary, it's frightening, it's all of those things, but let's spread it. Let's do this. We can do it together.